the sound of wind through the canyon, was the only conversation Owen Vance had known for 17 days, and he had begun to wonder if his own voice had turned to dust like everything else in this God-forsaken stretch of Colorado wilderness. He sat on the porch of his weathered cabin outside Alamosa, watching the sun sink behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, his coffee gone cold in his tin cup, his throat as dry as the parched earth beneath his boots, not from thirst but from sheer disuse. Owen was 27 years old, though the lines around his eyes suggested someone who had lived harder than his years. He had come to this isolated ranch 3 months ago, running from memories that chased him like wolves, memories of a woman who had promised forever and delivered betrayal, of a business partner who had stolen everything he had worked for in Denver, of a father whose last words had been disappointment. The cattle he tended were scattered across 200 acres of scrubland, and some days he went from dawn until dusk seeing nothing but their blank faces and the endless sky. He had stopped talking to them after the first week when he realized how pathetic he sounded, his voice echoing off the rocks with no response but the occasional low of an indifferent cow. The isolation had crept up on him slowly, like frost forming on a window. First, it had been a relief, a balm to his wounded pride and broken heart. Then it had become comfortable, easy to sink into the silence. Now it was something else entirely. Something that felt permanent, like he was disappearing into the landscape, becoming just another weathered stone, another twisted juniper, another forgotten thing in a forgotten place. He had not seen another human being since he had ridden into Alamosa 17 days ago for supplies, exchanging only the bare minimum of words with the general store owner, a gruff man named Henderson, who seemed to prefer silence as much as Owen did. Before that, it had been nearly 2 weeks. Owen could feel something shifting inside him, some fundamental part of what made him human slowly eroding away, and he was not entirely sure he cared enough to stop it. The 18th day dawned clear and cold, as October days in the Colorado high country often did in 1883. Owen was mending a section of fence on the eastern pasture when he saw the dust rising in the distance, a plume against the blue sky that could only mean a rider approaching. His first instinct was to retreat, to head back to the cabin and pretend he had not seen anyone coming. But something made him stay, his hands stilling on the wire, his eyes fixed on that growing cloud of dust. The rider came closer, and Owen could make out details now. A smaller figure, sitting a chestnut mare with practiced ease, wearing a split riding skirt and a fitted jacket the color of autumn leaves. A woman, he realized with a start that was almost like pain. He had not spoken to a woman in months, not since before he had left Denver in disgrace and shame. She reined in her horse about 20 feet away, and Owen got his first clear look at her. She was young, probably around 23 or 24, with dark hair pinned up under a wide-brimmed hat, and eyes the color of sage in sunlight. Her face was dusty from the ride, but beneath the dust he could see fine features, a determined set to her jaw, and something in her expression that spoke of purpose. "Are you Owen Vance?" she asked, her voice clear and direct, no preamble, no polite small talk. Owen opened his mouth to respond, but what came out was barely a croak, a sound so broken and harsh that it startled them both. He cleared his throat, tried again, and managed something that approximated speech. "Yes." The word felt foreign on his tongue, rusty and strange, like a tool he had forgotten how to use. The woman dismounted, looping her horse's reins over a fence post with efficient movements. "My name is Sarah Norton. I have been looking for you for 3 days. They told me in town that you had a ranch out this way, but they were not exactly specific about directions. Owen stared at her, still struggling to form words, his mind racing to catch up. Looking for him. Why would anyone be looking for him? He cleared his throat again, and this time his voice came out a little stronger, though it still sounded rough and unused. Why? Sarah pulled off her riding gloves and fixed him with a direct gaze that made him feel exposed, seen in a way he had not been in longer than he could remember. Because you are the only person who can help me, and I am desperate enough to ride 3 days into the middle of nowhere to find you. There was something in her voice, a tremor beneath the determination, that caught Owen's attention despite his instinct to send her away. He found himself speaking again, the words coming easier now, like water beginning to flow through a long, dry creek bed. I do not know you. I do not know what you think I can do for you, but I think you have the wrong man. You worked for the Denver Land and Cattle Company 2 years ago, Sarah said, and Owen felt his stomach drop. You were their best surveyor. You mapped half of Colorado, found water where everyone else said there was none, helped dozens of ranchers stake legitimate claims. And you are honest, which is more than I can say for most men in your former profession. Former is right, Owen said, his voice bitter now, fully returned but carrying the weight of his failures. I do not do that work anymore. Whatever you need, you will have to find someone else. Sarah took a step closer, and Owen caught the scent of sage and horse and something floral, maybe lavender. There is no one else. Not for this. My father died 6 months ago and left me his ranch, 3,000 acres in the San Luis Valley, prime grazing land with water rights from the Rio Grande. It has been in my family since before Colorado was a state, since it was still territory. But a man named James Cardwell is trying to take it. He claims my father's original survey was fraudulent, that the water rights were never properly recorded, that half the land is actually public domain. Owen shook his head, already backing away. Take it to a lawyer, take it to the land office. This is not something I can help with. I have taken it to every lawyer in 3 counties, Sarah said, and now he could hear the desperation clearly, raw and real. They all say the same thing. Without an accurate survey, without proof that the original claims were legitimate, I do not have a case. Cardwell has money and influence. He has already bribed half the officials in the territory. My only chance is to hire an independent surveyor, someone with a reputation for honesty, someone who can go out there and prove that my father's claims were legal and true. And you think I am that person? Owen laughed, the sound harsh and rusty. Lady, I do not know what you heard about me, but I am not that man anymore. I lost everything because I trusted the wrong people. I do not help anyone now. I just try to keep my own head above water, and most days I am not even succeeding at that. Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying him with those sage-colored eyes, and Owen had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing past all his defenses, seeing the lonely, broken man he had become. I heard you lost your business because your partner framed you for falsifying claims, that he took everything you had built and left you with nothing but a ruined reputation. I heard that you were innocent, but that did not matter because he had the right connections and you did not. I heard that you disappeared into the mountains because you had nowhere else to go. Owen felt something twist in his chest, anger and shame and something else he could not name. Then you know I am the last person you should trust with this. No, Sarah said softly. I know you are exactly the person I need. Because you know what it is like to have everything taken from you by someone with more power and fewer scruples. Because you will not be bought or intimidated. And because, despite everything that has happened to you, people still say you are the best surveyor in Colorado. The words hung in the air between them, and Owen felt something cracking inside him, some wall he had built around himself beginning to crumble. He looked at this woman, this Sarah Norton who had ridden 3 days to find him, who was fighting to keep her father's legacy, and he saw in her eyes the same desperate determination he had once felt before it had been beaten out of him. "I cannot," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I do not have equipment anymore. I do not have maps or transit or anything I would need." "I have money," Sarah said quickly. "Not a lot, but enough. I can pay you, and I can pay for whatever equipment you need. Please, you are my last hope." Owen closed his eyes, fighting against the pull he felt, the sudden, unexpected desire to help this woman, to use his skills again for something that mattered. He had been silent for so long, alone for so long, that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to be needed, to have a purpose beyond simple survival. When he opened his eyes again, Sarah was still watching him, waiting, and he realized that his answer mattered to her in a way that nothing he had done in months had mattered to anyone. He took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was steadier than it had been in longer than he could remember. "Tell me about this ranch of yours." The relief that flooded Sarah's face was so profound that Owen felt an answering warmth in his own chest, something he had thought long dead stirring back to life. She smiled, and it transformed her entire appearance, making her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with mere features and everything to do with hope. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much. You will not regret this, I promise." Owen was not sure about that, but he found he did not want to send her away. "Come up to the cabin. You can tell me the whole story and we can figure out what we are dealing with." They walked together across the dusty yard, Sarah leading her horse, and Owen was acutely aware of another person's presence in a way he had not been in months. He could hear the rustle of her skirts, the creak of her saddle, the soft sound of her breathing. After so much silence, it was almost overwhelming inside the cabin. Owen realized with embarrassment how far he had let things slide. Dishes were piled in the basin. Dust covered every surface. His bedroll was tangled in the corner. Sarah did not comment on any of it, just accepted the chair he offered and launched into her story. Her father, Samuel Norton, had been one of the first ranchers in the San Luis Valley, establishing his claim in 1861 when the area was still rough territory. He had been a careful man, meticulous about his paperwork, and he had built one of the most successful cattle operations in southern Colorado. When he died suddenly in April, thrown from a horse and hitting his head on a rock, Sarah had inherited everything. "I grew up on that ranch," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "My mother died when I was 10, and it was just Father and me after that. He taught me everything, how to run cattle, how to manage the books, how to deal with buyers and hands and all of it. I am not some city girl playing at ranching. That land is my life." But James Cardwell, a wealthy businessman from Denver with ambitions to build a cattle empire in the valley, had apparently been trying to buy the Norton Ranch for years. Samuel had refused every offer, some of them substantial. Now, with Samuel dead and Sarah alone, Cardwell had apparently decided to take by legal manipulation what he could not buy. "He filed a challenge to our land patents 3 weeks ago," Sarah explained, her hands clenched in her lap. "He has documents, or claims to have documents, showing that my father's original survey was done by an unlicensed surveyor, that the boundaries were incorrectly marked, that we have been grazing cattle on public land for 20 years. He is demanding that our claim be voided and the land open to new claims, which of course he will immediately file for himself." Owen listened, his surveyor's mind already working through the problems. "What documentation do you have?" "Everything my father kept, which is considerable. Original claim papers, water rights filings, correspondence with the Territorial Land Office. But without an independent survey to verify the boundaries, none of it may be enough. Cardwell has hired his own surveyors, men who will say whatever he pays them to say. Then we go out there and do it right, Owen said, surprised by his own certainty. We survey every inch of your property, verify the boundaries against the original claims, document everything so thoroughly that no judge in Colorado can dismiss it. Sarah's eyes shone with gratitude and something else, something that made Owen's heart beat a little faster. When can we start? I will need to go into Alamosa tomorrow, get equipment. If you can provide funds for a transit and chains and surveying poles, we can head out to your ranch the day after. I will come with you to town, Sarah said immediately. I have been camping about 5 miles south of here. I can ride back, get my things, and meet you at first light. Owen nodded, then realized he should offer hospitality. You can stay here tonight. I will sleep in the barn. It is getting dark and there is no sense in you riding out now. Sarah hesitated, then accepted with a small smile. Thank you. I admit I am tired of sleeping on the ground. They spent the evening in companionable conversation. Sarah telling him more about her ranch and her plans for it. Owen finding himself talking more than he had in months, his voice growing stronger with use. He told her about his own history, about growing up in Kansas, learning surveying from his uncle, building his business in Denver only to lose it all to betrayal. Sarah listened without judgment, without pity, just open acceptance that made something in Owen's chest unclench. When darkness fell completely, Owen took his bedroll out to the barn, leaving Sarah the cabin. But he found he could not sleep, his mind racing with plans and calculations, and underneath it all, an awareness of the woman sleeping in his cabin, the way her presence had filled the empty spaces, the sound of her voice driving away the silence that had been suffocating him. The next morning dawned bright and cold, frost glittering on the grass. Owen found Sarah already up, a pot of coffee brewing on the stove, the cabin somehow looking more lived in than it had in weeks. She smiled at him when he came in, and he felt the pull again, stronger now, something beyond gratitude or professional respect. They rode into Alamosa together, and Owen found himself watching her, the easy way she sat her horse, the confidence in her movements. She was not a delicate woman, not some fragile thing that needed protection. She was strong and capable, and he found that strength incredibly attractive. In town, Owen used the money Sarah provided to purchase a surveyor's transit, measuring chains, wooden stakes, and all the other equipment he would need. Henderson at the general store raised his eyebrows when Owen actually spoke to him in full sentences, asking specific questions about what was available. You are sounding more like your old self, Henderson observed. Maybe I am remembering how, Owen replied, glancing at Sarah, who was examining a display of leather goods across the store. They left Alamosa by noon, heading west and then south toward the San Luis Valley. Sarah's ranch was a day-and-a-half ride, she explained, in the fertile bottomland where the Rio Grande cut through the valley. As they rode, they talked more, the conversation flowing easier now that Owen's voice had fully returned. He learned that Sarah loved the ranch with a fierce passion, that she had once been engaged to a man her father disapproved of and had broken it off rather than leave the land, that she dreamed of expanding the cattle operation and maybe starting a horse breeding program. What about you? She asked as they made camp that first night, the stars impossibly bright in the thin mountain air. What do you dream about? Owen was quiet for a long moment, stirring the fire with a stick. I used to dream about building something that lasted, a business with my name on it that stood for quality and honesty. That seems foolish now. "It is not foolish," Sarah said softly. "It is admirable. And just because someone took that dream from you does not mean it is gone forever. Maybe you just need to build it differently this time." Her words stayed with him as he lay in his bedroll that night, the sound of her breathing from across the fire somehow comforting rather than intrusive. For the first time in months, he felt like maybe there was a future beyond just surviving day to day. They reached the Norton ranch late the following afternoon, and Owen had to admit he was impressed. The ranch house was substantial, built of adobe and timber, sitting on a slight rise with views across the valley. Outbuildings were well maintained, corrals sturdy, and in the distance he could see cattle grazing on rich grassland. "This is beautiful," he said honestly. Sarah's face glowed with pride. "My father built most of it with his own hands. I will not let Cardwell take it." Over the next week, Owen threw himself into the survey work with an intensity that surprised him. He had forgotten how much he loved this work, the precision of it, the way landscape revealed its secrets through careful measurement and observation. Sarah worked alongside him, carrying stakes and chains, recording measurements in the field book, her presence constant and somehow essential. They worked from dawn until dusk, mapping every boundary marker, every water source, every landmark mentioned in the original claim papers. Owen cross-referenced everything against survey maps from the Territorial Land Office, documents Sarah's father had carefully preserved. The more he worked, the more certain he became that the original survey had been completely legitimate, that Samuel Norton's claims were unassailable. But he also discovered something troubling. Some of the original boundary markers had been moved, just slightly, just enough that a careless or dishonest surveyor might claim the property lines were incorrect. It had been done carefully, professionally, and Owen knew immediately that this was Cardwell's doing. "He has tampered with the evidence," Owen told Sarah one evening as they sat on the porch of the ranch house, both exhausted from the day's work. "Someone has moved the original markers, probably in the last few months, to make it look like your father's survey was wrong." Sarah's face paled. "Can you prove it?" "I think so. The markers are stone cairns, and you can see where they have been disturbed recently, vegetation patterns that do not match, soil that has been turned. If I document everything correctly, photograph it, get written testimony from anyone who remembers where the original markers stood, we might have enough." "The foreman has been here since the beginning," Sarah said, hope creeping into her voice. "Old Tom Benson. He helped my father set those markers 40 years ago." Over the following days, Owen not only completed the survey but built a comprehensive case proving that the Norton Ranch boundaries were exactly where they should be, and that someone had deliberately tampered with evidence to make it appear otherwise. He worked with an energy he had not felt in a year, driven by determination to help Sarah, but also by something deeper, something he was not quite ready to name. He was falling in love with her. He realized it one afternoon when she laughed at something he said, her whole face lighting up, and he felt like he could see the sun after months of darkness. He had been attracted to her from the beginning, but this was different. This was the feeling of finding someone who understood him, who saw him clearly and did not turn away, who brought out the best parts of him he had thought were lost forever. But he did not say anything. She was his client. She was fighting for her survival. The last thing she needed was him complicating things with feelings she might not share. Sarah, for her part, was experiencing her own revelation. She had hired Owen because she needed his professional skills, but somewhere along the way, he had become more than just a surveyor to her. She loved the way his face became animated when he talked about his work, the way he treated her like an equal partner rather than some fragile woman who needed protecting, the way his voice, once so rough and broken, had become strong and sure again. She found herself watching him when he was not looking, admiring the way he moved, efficient and graceful, the way his hands handled the surveying equipment with such care and precision. She thought about those hands touching her, and the thought made her flush with heat, despite the cool mountain air. They had been working together for nearly 3 weeks when James Cardwell himself showed up at the Norton ranch. He arrived with 4 men, all hard-looking and armed, and Owen felt his stomach tighten with tension. Cardwell was in his mid-40s, well-dressed in the manner of wealthy Denver businessmen, with cold eyes and a smile that did not reach them. He looked around the ranch with the air of a man inspecting property he already owned. "Miss Norton," he said, tipping his hat with mocking politeness. "I heard you had hired a surveyor. I thought I would come see for myself who was foolish enough to take your money for a lost cause." Sarah stood her ground, though Owen could see the tension in her shoulders. "Mr. Vance is not foolish. He is thorough. And what he has found is going to prove that your claims against this ranch are fraudulent." Cardwell's eyes shifted to Owen, and Owen saw recognition flicker there, followed by something like satisfaction. "Owen Vance, I heard you had disappeared into the mountains. I thought you learned your lesson about getting involved in other people's business. What lesson would that be?" Owen asked, his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. "That men with power always win, and men without it always lose," Cardwell said bluntly. "Your former partner understood that. He is quite successful now, I hear. Whereas you are living in a shack and taking charity work from desperate women." Owen took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists, but Sarah put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Leave our property, Mr. Cardwell. Now," Cardwell laughed, a sound without humor. "Your property. That is charming. Miss Norton, I tried to buy this ranch fairly from your father. He refused out of stubbornness and sentiment. I am not a patient man, but I am a thorough one. By the time my lawyers are done, you will not own so much as a fence post. And whatever your surveyor has found, I promise you it will not be enough." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Owen. "A word of advice, Vance. Walk away from this. Men who cross me tend to regret it. I would hate to see you lose what little you have left." After Cardwell and his men rode away, Sarah turned to Owen, her face troubled. "He is dangerous. Maybe more dangerous than I realized. If you want to walk away, I would understand." Owen looked at her, at the fear and determination warring in her eyes, and he knew he could not walk away even if he wanted to. "I am not going anywhere. We are going to beat him, Sarah. I promise you that." She held his gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them, unspoken but powerful. Then she nodded, and together they went back to work. Over the next few days, Owen put the finishing touches on his survey report, a document so detailed and comprehensive that it left no room for doubt. He had measurements, photographs, witness statements, and documented evidence of the tampered boundary markers. It was the best work he had ever done, and he knew it. But more than the work, he found himself treasuring the time with Sarah, the way they had fallen into an easy partnership, finishing each other's sentences, working in comfortable silence or animated conversation depending on the moment. They took meals together. She showed him every corner of the ranch she loved so much, and he told her stories about his surveying work, places he had been, things he had seen. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains, Sarah said quietly, "I have been thinking about what happens after this is over, after we win and Cardwell is defeated. I have been alone here since Father died, managing everything by myself. It has been hard." Owen's heart was beating faster, though he tried to keep his voice casual. "You have done an incredible job. Your father would be proud." But it is lonely, Sarah continued, not looking at him. This ranch is big. It needs more than one person to run it properly. I have been thinking I should maybe look for a partner, someone with skills I do not have, someone I could trust. That sounds like a good idea, Owen said carefully. Sarah finally turned to look at him, and her eyes were direct and clear. I was thinking of someone who knows land, who understands surveys and water rights and boundaries, someone who is honest and hardworking, someone who might want a second chance to build something that lasts. Owen's breath caught in his throat. Sarah, are you asking me to stay after this is done? I am asking if you want to, she said softly. Not as hired help, as a partner, an equal partner in this ranch. Owen stood up, paced to the edge of the porch, his mind racing. It was everything he had lost and more, a chance to rebuild, to have a purpose again, to create something lasting. But more than that, it was a chance to stay with Sarah, to see where this thing between them might lead. He turned back to her. I want that, more than I can say. But Sarah, I need you to know it is not just about the ranch. These weeks with you, they have meant something to me. You have meant something to me. You brought me back to life. Before you came, I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be human, to have a voice, to matter to anyone. You gave that back to me. Sarah stood and crossed to him, and in the fading light her eyes were luminous. I know. I feel it too, Owen. This was supposed to be business, but it became something else. You make me feel safe and seen and understood in a way I never have before. I trust you. I think I might be falling in love with you. Might be. Owen asked, his voice rough with emotion, and then he was pulling her close, and she was coming into his arms like she belonged there, and he was kissing her the way he had wanted to for weeks, tasting her lips, feeling her body pressed against his, and it was like coming home to a place he had never been, but had always been searching for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah was smiling. Definitely falling. Maybe already fallen. Good, Owen said, resting his forehead against hers. Because I fell for you the first day you rode up to my fence, looking fierce and desperate and beautiful. I tried to fight it, told myself it was just gratitude or loneliness, but it is not. It is love, Sarah. I love you. Then stay, she whispered. Help me fight Cardwell, and then stay and help me run this ranch. Stay and build that dream you talked about. Stay and be with me. Yes, he said simply, and kissed her again, sealing the promise. The hearing with the Territorial Land Office was scheduled for early November in the county seat. Owen prepared meticulously, organizing his evidence, rehearsing his presentation, anticipating every argument Cardwell's lawyers might make. Sarah rode with him, her presence giving him strength and confidence. The hearing room was packed, word having spread that this was a significant case. Cardwell was there with 3 lawyers, all of them looking confident and well-fed. Owen sat at the opposite table with Sarah, feeling the weight of everything resting on his shoulders. When it was his turn to present, Owen stood and began to speak, his voice clear and strong. He presented the survey results systematically, walking the land office officials through every measurement, every boundary marker, every piece of evidence. He showed photographs of the tampered cairns, comparing them to descriptions from 40 years ago. He presented testimony from Tom Benson and 2 other old-timers who had been in the valley since the beginning. He spoke for over an hour, and by the end, even Cardwell's lawyers looked worried. Owen's evidence was simply too comprehensive, too detailed, too honest to be dismissed. Cardwell himself took the stand, trying to discredit Owen by bringing up his past troubles in Denver. This man was accused of falsifying surveys for profit. How can we trust anything he presents? But Owen was ready for that. I was accused falsely by a corrupt partner who is now under investigation himself for fraud. Those charges were never proven because they were lies. My work speaks for itself. Every measurement can be verified. Every photograph can be examined. Every witness is willing to testify under oath. Mr. Cardwell is attacking my character because he cannot attack my evidence. The land office officials deliberated for 2 hours before returning with their decision. The Norton Ranch boundaries were legally established and correctly surveyed. The claims against the property were dismissed. Furthermore, there would be an investigation into the tampered boundary markers, and if evidence of deliberate fraud was found, charges would be filed. Cardwell left the hearing room looking murderous, but there was nothing he could do. He had lost, and everyone knew it. Outside, Sarah threw her arms around Owen, laughing and crying at the same time. "We did it. We actually did it. You did it," Owen said, holding her tight. "You fought for what was yours and you won." "We won," she corrected. "Partners, remember." "Partners," he agreed, and kissed her there on the steps of the courthouse, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except this woman in his arms and the future spreading out before them like the vast Colorado sky. They returned to the Norton Ranch, which now felt like home to Owen in a way his cabin never had. Over the winter, they worked side by side, Owen's surveying expertise helping to identify new pastures and water sources, Sarah's ranching knowledge guiding the daily operations. The hands accepted Owen easily, especially after old Tom. Benson declared him a good man and a straight shooter. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling softly outside and a fire crackling in the hearth, Owen asked Sarah to marry him properly, with a ring he had ridden all the way to Denver to buy. She said yes before he even finished the question, and they were married in January in the small church in Alamosa, with half the valley in attendance. Their first year of marriage was hard work, but joyful, learning each other's rhythms, building a true partnership in both the ranch and their life together. Owen filed papers to formally change the ranch name to Norton Vance Cattle Company, equal partners in everything. He established a side business doing independent surveying work for other ranchers in the valley, building a reputation for honesty and precision that gradually erased the stain of his past troubles. Sarah blossomed under the security of their partnership, her confidence growing as the ranch prospered. She started the horse breeding program she had dreamed about, and Owen used his surveying skills to help design new pastures and water systems that maximized their grazing land. Cardwell tried one more time to cause trouble, filing a lawsuit claiming defamation, but it was thrown out quickly. After that, he seemed to give up, focusing his ambitions elsewhere. Owen and Sarah occasionally heard news of him, usually involving some new business scheme or political maneuvering, but he never bothered them again. In the fall of their second year of marriage, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Owen was overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure, terrified of being a father, desperate to do it right. Sarah laughed at his fears and told him he would be wonderful, and she was right. Their son was born in May, a healthy boy with Sarah's eyes and Owen's stubborn chin. They named him Samuel, after Sarah's father, and Owen felt like his life had come full circle from the lonely, silent man he had been to someone with a family, a purpose, a voice that mattered. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, fierce and loud from her first breath. They named her Charlotte, and she had red hair that came from neither parent but apparently from some distant ancestor on Sarah's side. Owen adored her instantly, this tiny creature who demanded attention and gave love so freely. Life settled into a rhythm that was busy and full and deeply satisfying. The ranch continued to prosper, growing into one of the most successful operations in the San Luis Valley. Owen's surveying business expanded, and he took on a young apprentice from town, teaching him the trade with the same care his uncle had once shown him. Sarah and Owen grew together in the way of couples who truly partner with each other, their love deepening from that first passionate attraction into something richer and more complex. They still worked side by side most days, still talked for hours on the porch in the evenings, still made each other laugh and occasionally drove each other crazy. But there was a foundation beneath it all now, something solid and unshakable. On their 10th anniversary, sitting on the porch where Owen had first told Sarah he loved her, watching Samuel and Charlotte play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains, Sarah leaned her head on Owen's shoulder and said, "Do you remember when you thought you had lost your voice forever?" "I remember," Owen said, putting his arm around her. "I remember thinking I was disappearing, becoming nothing, and then you rode up and everything changed." "You gave me my ranch back," Sarah said, "but you gave me so much more than that. You gave me a partner, a love I did not think I would ever find. You gave me this life, this family. Everything I have because you found your voice again." "I found it because you gave me a reason to use it," Owen replied. "Because you needed me, and I needed to be needed. Because you saw something in me worth saving when I had given up on myself." Samuel came running up to the porch, demanding that his father come see the frog he had found by the creek. Charlotte was right behind him, insisting that dolls were much more interesting than frogs. Owen laughed and stood, extending a hand to help Sarah up. "Duty calls," he said. "Always," she agreed, smiling, and together they went to see the frog and the doll, to settle the dispute and kiss scraped knees and tuck their children in when the stars came out. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Owen and Sarah lay in their bed, wrapped in each other's arms. Owen thought about the lonely cowboy he had been, the man who had gone days without speaking, who had thought he had nothing left to live for. He thought about the woman who had ridden into his life demanding help and given him back everything he thought he had lost. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Sarah replied, her voice soft and content. "Always have, always will." Outside, the wind whispered through the canyon. But inside there was only warmth and the sound of breathing, the small noises of a home filled with love and life and purpose. Owen fell asleep with Sarah in his arms, grateful beyond words for the day she had ridden up to his fence, for the sound of his own voice returned, for this beautiful, impossible life they had built together. Years continued to pass, each one adding layers to their story. Samuel grew tall and strong, showing an aptitude for ranching that made Sarah proud. Charlotte proved to have Owen's methodical mind, and by the age of 12, she was helping with the surveying work, learning to use the transit and measure chains with precision that delighted her father. The ranch expanded moderately, never growing so large that it lost the personal touch that Samuel Norton had established. Owen and Sarah made a practice of treating their ranch hands fairly, paying good wages, and several of the men who started as young cowboys ended up staying for decades, raising their own families in cabins on Norton Vance land. Owen's reputation as an honest surveyor spread throughout Colorado. He was occasionally called to Denver or other distant locations to consult on complicated cases, but he always returned home quickly, never wanting to be away from Sarah and the children longer than necessary. He never forgot what loneliness felt like, and he never took for granted the gift of having people who needed him, who loved him, who waited for him to come home. When Samuel turned 18, Owen and Sarah gave him 1,000 acres of his own to manage, a portion of the ranch that he could develop according to his own vision. He did well with it, implementing new breeding strategies and water management techniques that improved the entire operation. Charlotte, at 16, announced that she wanted to become a professional surveyor like her father, and Owen's heart swelled with pride. He began to seriously train her, and she proved to be naturally gifted, seeing patterns and possibilities in the landscape that most people missed. On their 20th anniversary, the whole valley seemed to celebrate with them. There was a party at the ranch that lasted 2 days, with people coming from all over the territory to honor the couple who had become pillars of the community. Someone gave a speech about how Owen and Sarah had proven that hard work, honesty, and true partnership could overcome any obstacle. Sarah cried happy tears, and Owen held her hand throughout, marveling at how far they had come. As they entered their 50s, Owen and Sarah began to think about legacy and the future beyond their own lives. Charlotte, now a certified surveyor working alongside her father, had married a young lawyer from Alamosa, a good man who respected her career and supported her ambitions. Samuel had married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a woman as strong and capable as his own mother, and they had given Owen and Sarah 3 grandchildren who filled the ranch house with noise and laughter. Owen still sometimes thought about those 17 days of silence, the man he had been before Sarah rode into his life. It seemed like another lifetime, another person entirely. He had been so lost, so convinced that his life was over, that he had nothing left to give. And then Sarah had appeared, desperate and determined, and she had shown him that loss was not the end, that starting over was possible, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. One evening, when they were both in their late 50s, sitting on the same porch where they had shared so many conversations over the years, Sarah asked, "Do you have any regrets? Anything you wish you had done differently?" Owen thought about it seriously, looking out over the land they had built together, hearing the laughter of grandchildren playing somewhere in the distance. "No," he said finally. "Every hard thing, every failure, every moment of suffering, it all led me here to you, to this life. I would not change a single thing." Sarah smiled and took his hand. "Good answer. Though I might have regretted it if I had not found you. I was so desperate that day I rode up to your fence. I was absolutely terrified that you would send me away." "I almost did," Owen admitted. "I was so deep in my own misery that I could barely see past it. But something about you made me want to try, made me remember who I used to be, or maybe showed me who I could become." "We saved each other," Sarah said softly. "I needed your skills and your honesty, and you needed a reason to remember your voice, to remember that you mattered. We gave each other exactly what we needed exactly when we needed it. And then we fell in love," Owen added, lifting her hand to kiss it. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Sarah corrected with a smile. "The first best was agreeing to help me with the survey. The love was just excellent timing." They laughed together, the easy laughter of people who had shared decades of life, who knew each other completely and loved each other anyway. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that was not lonely at all but full of companionship and contentment. Charlotte arrived the next day with news that she had been offered a position with the territorial government, helping to establish standardized surveying practices across Colorado. It was a prestigious appointment, recognition of her skill and integrity. Owen was bursting with pride, seeing his daughter accomplish things he had once dreamed of, creating the kind of reputation he had always wanted. "You should take it," he told her. "You are ready. More than ready. You will do incredible work." "I learned from the best," Charlotte said, hugging him tightly. "Everything I know about surveying, about honesty, about doing work that matters, I learned from you, Papa. I want to make you proud." "You already have," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every single day you make me proud." As Colorado moved toward the 20th century, The Norton Vance Ranch remained a constant, a place where values of hard work, integrity, and family were upheld and passed down through generations. Samuel took over more of the daily operations as Owen and Sarah gradually stepped back, though neither of them ever truly retired. Owen continued to take on occasional surveying jobs well into his 60s, and Sarah remained active in the breeding program she had started. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even one great-grandchild, a tiny boy named Owen after his great-grandfather. Looking at this newest generation, Owen felt a profound sense of accomplishment and gratitude. He had come so close to giving up, to disappearing entirely, and instead he had built something that would last far beyond his own life. One afternoon in their 65th year, Owen and Sarah took a ride together out to the eastern pasture where they had first surveyed those boundary markers decades ago. The land looked different now, more developed, more prosperous, but the bones of it remained the same. The mountains still rose in the distance, the sky was still impossibly vast, the wind still whispered through the grass. "You remember standing right here, trying to measure that boundary, and I made some joke about something and you actually laughed?" Sarah asked. "It was the first time I heard you really laugh, not just a polite chuckle but a real, genuine laugh. I remember thinking that I could fall in love with someone who laughed like that." "I remember," Owen said. "I remember thinking you were the most alive person I had ever met, the way you threw yourself into everything with such passion. I had been dead inside for so long, and you made me want to be alive again." They stood together in the afternoon sun, still holding hands after all these years, and Owen thought about voice and silence, about loneliness and connection, about loss and redemption. He thought about the lonely cowboy who had gone days without speaking, and the woman who had visited and reminded him of the sound of his voice. But more than that, she had reminded him of his purpose, his worth, his capacity for love and work and building something meaningful. As they rode back to the ranch house, the sun beginning its descent toward the mountains, Owen felt complete peace. His voice had been silent once, but Sarah had called it back. His heart had been broken, but she had helped him mend it. His life had seemed over, but together they had created something better than he had ever imagined possible. That evening, with the whole family gathered around the dinner table, multiple generations sharing food and stories and laughter, Owen looked at Sarah across the table and saw her looking back at him with the same love and understanding that had characterized their entire marriage. He raised his glass in a silent toast, and she smiled and raised hers in return. Later, as they prepared for bed, Sarah said, "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best," Owen agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible, better than I deserved." "You deserved every bit of it," Sarah said firmly. "You are a good man, Owen Vance. You always were, even when you had forgotten it yourself. I am proud to have shared my life with you." "And I with you," Owen replied, pulling her close. "You saved me, Sarah, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," she corrected, as she always did. "That is what love does. It saves us from ourselves, from loneliness, from silence. It gives us our voice back." They fell asleep that night as they had for over 30 years, wrapped in each other's arms, safe and content and grateful. Outside, the wind whispered through the Colorado night, carrying the sounds of cattle lowing, horses moving in their corrals, the small sounds of a working ranch settling down for the night. Years later, when both Owen and Sarah had passed into legend, old-timers in the San Luis Valley would still tell the story of the lonely cowboy who had lost his voice and the determined woman who helped him find it again. They would talk about the survey that saved a ranch, about the love that grew from partnership and respect, about two people who built something that lasted. And on the Norton Vance Ranch, now in its fourth generation of family ownership, there hung a portrait in the main room showing Owen and Sarah in their prime, standing together on the porch of the ranch house, Sarah's hand on Owen's shoulder, both of them looking at the camera with expressions of quiet confidence and deep contentment. Below the portrait was a brass plaque that read, "Owen Vance and Sarah Norton Vance, partners in all things, founders of our family legacy." Their great-great-grandchildren would look at that portrait and ask about them, and someone would tell the story again. The one about the surveyor who almost gave up and the rancher who would not let him, about finding your voice again after silence, about love that transforms and redeems, about building something that lasts not through power or money but through honesty, hard work, and the courage to start over when everything seems lost. It was a good story, a true story, and it was theirs.